So yes, it is a really exciting season in our church's history, in our long history of 2.5 years, all that time. But there's been so many awesome things that God has been doing in us and through us. I just wanted to really start by sharing some of those things, kind of like by the numbers, some of the awesome stuff that's been happening thus far in 2022. We'll just sort of walk through these. The first number is 50,000. I don't know if you guys know this, but because of your generosity, our generosity as a church, we've been able to give back into Kokomo $50,000 thus far this year to local nonprofits and to people doing incredible work, and just to be outrageously generous into our community. How cool is that so far, right? $50,000. This next number, $20,000. I don't know if you guys knew this, but part of our DNA as a church here at Bridgeway is to be a church planting church. And so we're always looking for a local leader in a community that we believe in, that we want to pour fuel on their fire. So we have committed and fulfilled the commitment of giving $20,000 to our first church plant in Peru, Indiana, Story Church. They are meeting at the Roxy 5 movie theater right now, which is so cool. And we're one of the largest contributors financially to their ministry. And then we've already fulfilled that commitment, which is really an incredible thing, right? Really, really cool. Here's another one. Number 2 doesn't look that impressive, but this number means a lot to me because we are in not just one, but 2 local elementary schools making a difference weekly. We're in Elwood Haynes Elementary School, and then this year we bumped up, and now we have Bonaire Elementary School as well. And we every month are blessing their staff team and supporting their staff team, and we're mentoring kids inside of these schools. We have over 50 people that are mentoring in both of these schools throughout the week. I'm over at Elwood Haynes on Thursday afternoons. It's just a really awesome thing. And what I like to say is, why can't we just do it to all the schools, right? We just keep being a blessing to all the schools. So I love that. That's another awesome number right there. 30, which is the amount of people that have gone into the waters of baptism and devoted their life to Jesus through our church this year, you guys. 30 people thus far. We celebrate 4 of those this morning. Really, really cool. And then 90, I don't know if you guys know this, but from birth all the way to senior year, all the way from kids and students, we're serving weekly 90 kids and students in our Next Gen ministry. And it's just kind of bursting at the seams, and it's just an incredible thing to hear the stories like from Jacob, who's getting baptized this morning, to the awesome stuff happening in the middle of the week, Wednesdays at Bridgeway students for middle school and high school students. I know many of you guys don't know what goes on in our student ministry. It's just a little over a year old, but I'd like to share this video that we shot so you can see some of the awesome stuff God's doing on Wednesdays. Check it out.
What's fun about Wednesday at Bridgeway students is that you never know what's going to happen, and every week there's something new to look forward to.
Give me a place where I belong because I've been able to make friends here.
I love Bridgeway students because it's fun and I have a lot of friends and they're really nice.
I invited my friend to go to the summer camp that we had. It was called Mix. And I also invited someone to start coming to students' nights, and I thought it was really fun. And I also like participating in all the activities that we have, and especially against Sour Patch Kids whenever I win, which is usually about half the time.
Bridgeway students has given me a way to help and include others by just having mentors here to help me through my path and my faith. They've just shown me several ways that I can take, and they've helped me through every step.
Bridgeway students is fun because I get to hang out with my friends and it's just really fun.
Bridgeway students has helped me grow my faith by helping me take more of a mentor role with this class, and just being able to explore that side of my faith.
I've been able to help with the keys on worship, and that's been really cool too. I started that a couple weeks ago, and it was really fun. And so I'm going to keep doing that for a while.
Yesterday I met a man, he knew everywhere. Asked if we
So I love seeing what God's doing for our middle school and high school students on Wednesdays because I don't know if you guys have read statistics or heard about Gen Z and their trends when it comes to organized faith or religion. It's kind of some daunting stuff. It seems like more than any generation, they're skeptical and not wanting to have anything to do with any kind of faith community or Christian spirituality. But man, because we are investing and because of our next gen pastor Nico Gruber's leadership and their team, like we're just not experiencing that. And we're less than 2 years old inside this ministry, and it's growing, and we've seen students take next steps in their faith. And as you saw in the video, they're not just coming to receive, but students are finding a way to contribute and to be a part of what God is doing, because we don't believe that this next generation, they're the church of the future. We believe that they're the church of right here and right now, and we want to put our money where our mouth is inside of that. So it's an awesome thing seeing what God is doing as he's making disciples out of middle school and high school students. And we're just seeing some incredible stuff happen. As you can see, all throughout our church, there's awesome things that God's doing in us and through us. But if you've been around the last couple of weeks, you know that we've got a challenge in front of us. Pretty daunting challenge. I don't want to be grim or anything, but in 17 months, we homeless. We got no place to go. We're renting this facility right here, coming to the end of our lease, and they want to bump our rent significantly, and they also ultimately want to sell the building in 17 months, and we are not interested in purchasing this building. So our leadership, we were sort of banging our head up against a wall trying to find a place where we could gather and it would make sense for us to grow into, and we just really struggled looking around our community for it. Until one day I parked where I normally park across the street early on Sunday mornings, and I realized that there was 3 acres for sale right across the street. It's like we were looking for the promised land all over town, and God just sort of put it right in front of my face, right? So we put an offer in on land, and guys, we have an accepted purchase agreement on this lot right here, right across the street. If you guys didn't know that. That's where we're going to build our next home, our next place to gather in on Sundays and to bless Kokomo from. A big old parking lot. We're going to put the building on that grassy area right there, and we are so excited about it. But between getting, the real challenge in getting from here to there is that we have got to raise some capital. We've got to pull together a sizable amount of money for a down payment for us to start the construction loan process. And so that's why we're in this Bridge to the Future journey together, is because we are doing something that's kind of crazy and something kind of unheard of. And for a church that hasn't even reached our 3rd birthday, it's something that I would never think that we would be up for already. But this is what God has put in front of us for our next move as a community. But for us to do that, we're going to have to grow in our trust, stretch in our generosity, and our sacrifice and our surrender, because our primary goal for this series and in this next season is right here. We'll say it this way. Our primary goal is 100% participation. And we're asking everyone who calls Bridgeway home to participate and go all in on this. Now, I'm looking around, and I know we have some guests here this morning. And so welcome to coming to church in the middle of a capital campaign. It just always feels great and awkward and terrible. But for you, I hope you don't hear any kind of coercion or any kind of pressure or guilt or shame this morning. If you're a guest here, I just hope that you see that we're a community of faith, that we're on mission and we're about moving with the Spirit and moving where God is calling us, but don't feel any pressure. But if you're here and you are a part of the Bridgeway family, we're unabashedly inviting you to contribute and to participate 100%. 100% participation looks like this. It looks like each and every one of us giving courageously, to give a one-time gift towards the down payment for our construction loan. And a one-time gift, the biggest gift you've ever given to our church or maybe any kind of organization. We're asking you to give courageously from your savings, from your accumulated resources, to go without so that we can all do this together. That's give courageously. We're asking everyone to give consistently. For so many of you that are giving in that automated recurring way that happens when you get paid or monthly, we're asking you to stretch that for the period of 2 years, which we really see as this whole project's timeline for when we're settled in. And so we're asking you to bump that by a certain percentage so that we all can get to where God is calling us to be. So give courageously, to give consistently, and then maybe the coolest one, or the one that I'm most currently terrified of, is we're asking everybody to give creatively, to literally have eyes to see the things that we own and consider what it looks like to sell some of those things, to go without, so that we can move forward together. In our household, why this has been scary is that I, this last week, sold my car, and trust me, it wasn't like a Tesla, it wasn't a massive check, but I'm going to get a car that, as my wife says, is not safe for our children to be in, to drive between here and work, and I'm giving all those resources into this venture together. I have a couple electric guitars. I have more than a couple, that's part of the problem. I love electric guitars and collecting them and playing them at home, and there's one that I saved for a really long time, and I still can't believe my wife said yes to allow me to have it. And it's actually up on reverb.com, which is like eBay for musical instruments, and I'm selling that, and we're trying to get all those resources back to this. So we're asking everybody to give courageously, to give consistently, and to give creatively. And I hope you hear this, and I hope you know that me and my family, we're going to be in the front lines, the front rows of doing this. And we're having uncomfortable conversations, and we're asking God to meet us in the gap between our fear and our full trust of him. And we're going on this journey all together. So we're asking everybody to give it all three of those levels. By November 20th, we're asking for commitments or pledges in. November 20th is going to be a commitment party, a commitment Sunday here, where we're going to celebrate what God is doing through our commitments together. That's coming up, but this is our primary goal, 100% participation. Our secondary goal is pretty scary when you look at it, because I don't talk in these terms and numbers often. But by our third birthday, we are trying to come up with $1.25 million for collateral, or for our down payment on construction on the loan across the street. Gulp, right? I mean, that's a big number, and we're just believing that if we all participate, if we all ask what God might have for us, that we are going to reach that by our third birthday, so that we can have hammers swinging across the street this spring. So that is the journey that we're on, and we know that it's going to take sacrifice, and it's going to take surrender. It's going to take us to ask the question, what is my sacrifice that God wants for this venture? But we know that we need to change, from the inside out for this to happen. And so this morning, I want to challenge us, wherever we are on our faith journey, to consider what our priorities are. What are our priorities? And to consider what they would look like for us to have our priorities recalibrated or shifted to look like the priorities of God's people, of partners with God. I mean, I was just thinking, like last night, with daylight savings time, you guys all look great and so rested, by the way. But I thought, we all have different priorities when it comes to daylight savings time for as long as it continues to last around the clock. But here, I want to ask you this hypothetical. Last night, we fell back and gained an hour because of daylight savings time. What did you do? Did you, got up the same time as usual and exercised like a psychopath? For you, did you stay up later like a party animal because you had so much more time and you're like, I'm just going to do something crazy because we got an extra hour? Or you probably a lot of us enjoyed an extra hour of sleep? Or are you like me and have two toddlers at home and you never know what your night of sleep is going to look like, so you went to bed even earlier as usual, doubling down on the extra sleep? I'm the lame person. Letter D. What did you guys do, right? We consider this shows our priorities. Here's another hypothetical I want us to consider, what our priorities are here. Put it this way. You have a list of things that you need to buy at the grocery store, but you can only pick up one item. Which one do you pick? If you can only pick up one item, is it your favorite snack? Is it the cheapest thing on your list? Is it your family's favorite seltzer water, like a LaCroix if you're fancy? Or is it your favorite vegetable, like a psycho? I don't understand. But what would it be if you could only pick up one thing, right? These things, they reveal what our priorities are in certain situations. And I think it's really important for us to ask the question of what our priorities are in our life, because I'll put it this way. Our priorities will determine our future. Our first things that we put in our bucket, the number one thing, the number 1.5, 2 thing, those things will determine our future. For example, if you're a parent and you want to have a great relationship with your adult children someday, your priority should be to build trust with them right here and right now, to build lasting memories in a safe place for them right here and right now. If that's your priority, then you will reach that goal of having a great relationship with your adult children. If your priority is, if your goal, if your future is for you to have a great job in finance, then it's right now you need to be in school working in the finance sector so you can have a great internship and make those relationships and learn the base skills for it to happen. The priorities that you set, they will determine your future, because your priorities are the thing that actually lead to your actions. Not just your intentions, but your actions. Our priorities will determine our future. And as a faith community here at Bridgeway, as we're standing at the precipice, like the very first steps of this journey of us building a new home so we could gather in and bless Kokomo from, I think it's a great question for us to ask, like, what are our number one priorities? What are our second priorities? I think maybe God wants to recalibrate us this morning to consider priorities in a different light. If you've been here the last couple weeks, we've been really walking through the story of this ancient man by the name of Abram, or maybe you've heard of him as Abraham. You know, Father Abraham had many sons. Like, this is before he was Father Abraham, and he's Abram, and he's got this incredible story of this imperfect faith following this perfect and patient God. And personally, for me, as I'm leading us through this venture together, his story has been so comforting and challenging and empowering for me. So I want to share some of this stuff with you. Week 1, we discovered that this voice from the one true God spoke to Abram and said, I want you to leave. I want you to leave everything you know and follow me and partner with me. And from you, you're going to be blessed and become a great nation with your own land. And you're also going to be a blessing to all people through all time. Ultimately, Jesus would come from Abram's family. We see, last week we discussed how Abram had this incredible faith story, but it wasn't like up and to the right because he doubted sometimes. He got scared. He considered, like, what if God wasn't going to follow through on his promise, but how God met him in those moments every single time and provided for him. God met him where he was, and his faith, it became less of just a concept and more of like the lifeblood of his life, to where it was like his trust in God was foundational because of the way that God had provided in all of these moments and given him just what he needed. And today we're going to look at Genesis chapter 13. We're going to walk through the whole chapter together in the text, and we're going to see how his priorities were different because he decided he wanted to be a partner with God. I think there's so much that we can learn from his priorities that challenge us today in our modern context. And hear me, I want them to challenge us today. If you're looking at some of these numbers that we're trying to raise and you're thinking about, are you going to help be a part of this, or are you just hoping other people become a part of this journey that we're having to build this building? And I want it to shake us up a little bit as well. So let's dive into the text, Genesis chapter 13, verse 1. So Abram went up from Egypt. He's on this journey of following God to the Negev with his wife and everything he had. And Lot, his nephew, went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. So Abram is on this journey of following this invisible God into the future, and God's going to provide him the land where he can settle down and become this great nation, but he hasn't done it yet. But on this journey, we see that Abram's doing quite well for himself. There's got a lot of external blessings in his life. We see he's wealthy in livestock, which is a big deal, and in silver and gold. I mean, wealthy in livestock during this time would be like owning a bunch of Bitcoin 9 months ago. It would feel really, really good. And it looks like everything's going up and to the right for Abram. But what we see next about Abram is we see his hat tip to show something about his character and about the way he's approaching this wealth, this abundance that he has accumulated. We're told this. From the Negev, he went from place to place. He's on this journey traveling until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. And I think this is really important for us to see, because while everything is going amazing in Abram's life, and he's got more wealth than he could possibly imagine, he's got this whole caravan that travels with him, we see here that Abram realizes that all of this wealth is not from his own hands. He realizes that it's a gift from God. It's actually a tool that God has given him to provide for himself and make a difference. It's not something that he has worked and toiled for. And isn't this a challenge to us in our American Western context when we think that we have earned everything that we have? We see Abram didn't see himself as an owner, as an earner. Abram saw himself as what I find to be much more powerful of an idea. Abram saw himself as a middle manager over his resources. Here we are, we're middle management. Nobody ever thinks that. But Abram realizes that everything he has is on loan from his heavenly Father. He didn't earn it. He didn't work and toil for it, and it wasn't by his own strength that he has it, but it's something that he is called to steward. He is called to manage. It's not his in the first place. And we see he does what an ancient man did during this time is he would mark a geographical spot to give honor and to give worship and to show his trust and his faith in God. And we're told he calls upon the name of the Lord, which is another way of saying that he is worshiping this God and trusting this God, not his own hands. But we see this about Abram's character, which I find to be so challenging. As he has so much, he's saying that it's actually not from his skill, his wit, his business acumen. It's a gift from God, so he praises God back. We're told this in the very next verse. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. Lot is Abram's nephew again. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling, fighting, bickering arose between Abram's herders and Lot's herders. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at this time. So everything's up and to the right. There's so much resource and abundance to go around, but it's also causing some issues. Who was it? Was it the Saint Notorious B.I.G. who said, if you're still with me, Saint Notorious B.I.G. said, mo money, mo problems, right? There have been seasons in our lives where we've had more than we could possibly imagine, but it actually can make things more complicated. It doesn't fix every issue. I think in our home, when we had our first son, Jack, we made one of these side rooms in our house like a toy room, and there were 7 toys there, and life was just bliss. He would be in there and want to play, and it was great. Well, we add our second son, Thomas, and there's a lot more toys now, and our side room has turned into a toy palace. And now that there's so many more toys, they fight and they bicker over everything. And Thomas sees his big brother Jack playing with one toy that he wants when he could pick 256 other toys, and it's like a nuclear meltdown in the playroom, right? Because just having more, it's not perfect. It actually makes things more complicated sometimes. And so Abram's people and Lot's people are starting to fight. And so Abram makes a decision that looks countercultural to us, and it was countercultural to them. And it's a shocking decision where it looks on the surface like Abram is not being a good businessman, but there's more going on. Abram does this next. So Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling, fighting between you and me, or between your herders and mine, your people and my people, for we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right, and if you go to the right, I'll go to the left. What is Abram doing? He's saying, just take whichever part of the land you want. I won't even do a survey. Just take it. I don't want to lose this relationship over this. I mean, this is so fascinating in a couple ways because you see Abram's priorities clear in front of us. One, Abram is saying this to Lot, just saying, take the land that you want. Before God has actually shown him the land that he's actually going to provide for him to become that great nation, to be a blessing through the whole world. He's still believing that God is going to provide this, even though he hasn't seen it. So he's trusting God inside of this. But the second priority that we see Abram make, which is so powerful and so countercultural, is that he puts other people and his relationship with other people above getting the win. Do you see what he's doing? He's saying that my relationship with you, my being able to serve you and to walk with you is so much more important than me getting the win on this investment, on this business deal, that I will willingly take the loss for you because I love you and I want to be in right relationship with you. I mean, this is countercultural. This is like, Abram, what are you doing? Didn't they teach you better in Hebrew business school? This is not what you're supposed to do at all. But we see Abram's priorities of trusting God and loving and serving people at the top of his list. To contrast that, we see Lot's response when Abram says, just take whatever land you want, I'll take the leftovers. This is what Lot does. Lot looked around and he saw that the whole plain of the Jordan towards Zoar was well watered like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. Lot looks around to take his pick to make sure it's the most fertile ground, to make sure it's the best yielding land. And I love what the text tells us too, is that he chose for himself, he grasped for himself exactly what he wanted. What were his priorities? Lot's priorities? Me, myself, and I. I'm going to make a killing on this. I can't believe they didn't do their homework. Abram's giving me all this. I'm going to take advantage of this because this is going to serve me, my people. my tribe. It sounds so selfish, right? But let's take a moment and be like, let's not beat Lot up for this. I think we have a lot more in common with Lot when we're making decisions about our life and our priorities than we would ever like to admit, right? Isn't it like one of the very first things we think, is this a good deal for me? Is this going to set me up for the future? Is this something that I actually want? Those are the questions that we ask all the time, and we answer, and it's odd because often our voice sounds exactly what God's voice sounds like, and God always wants us to do what we want to do for us. Asking, how does this move? How does this decision benefit me? This is exactly what Lot is thinking, and this is exactly what we're thinking often when we think about our pie of the resources that God has so graciously bestowed upon us to steward, to manage in our life. So at this point of the story, it looks like Abram is completely lost out. He just like threw his hands up and chose trusting this invisible God and trusting that he wanted to love and care for people and keep relationship important. And it's like he lost out. But this is what God does in Abram's story, and this is what God does in our story when we decide that we're going to partner with him often. God swoops in and gives a blessing that you would have never seen coming. He gives you exactly what you need in the moment where you're the most dependent, because this is what happens next. The Lord then talked to Abram, said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, look around from where you are, to the north and the south, to the east and the west. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. He's making good on his promise. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring would be counted. Go walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I'm giving it to you. So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord. It's almost like after God sees Abram have a different set of priorities that are about trusting him and serving and loving people, that God responds with a blessing. And he says, when you partner with me, I will take care of you, and you'll be a part of something so much bigger than yourself. And he says, here's the land. It's all going to be yours. And you don't have children yet, but I'm going to give you descendants that are going to be more than the dust of the earth. And then again, we see Abram's response of this victory. It's not saying that he did it all and it was all about his power, but we see at the very last verse, it says, there he built an altar to the Lord. He worshiped. He gave honor and praise and showed his faith and his trust in this God as he promised him this land. So in this chapter of the text, we see two men with two different set of priorities. One where it was all about prioritizing who God was and trusting him and caring for people before ourselves. The other was all about grasping everything he could to build his name, to build his empire, and to get the win. So the question, I want to ask you an uncomfortable question. A question where the rubber meets the road for us when we think about our short time on earth and the resources that God has invited us to manage and steward. I want to ask you this. What comes first when you make decisions about your life? When you think about the resources that you have and the decisions that you make with your calendar, with your skills, with your resources, what comes first? What's of priority towards you? If I can be honest, often, and especially when I'm not being intentional, my comfort comes first. My security comes first. And then if I have any time left over, I'm like, oh, is this good for, my family, those that I'm legally obligated to take care of? Like you think about those things. And don't hear me wrong, but we are obligated to take care of our families, and it's a responsible, loving thing to do first. But God is inviting us to think beyond just our flesh and blood to his people. So what comes first when you make decisions about your life and your resources that you're invited to manage? I don't ask this question to shame you or to bring guilt upon you. Please don't hear my heart in that at all. But I do think that God might be giving us, you, an opportunity today at church to recalibrate, to make an adjustment, to shift the way you're thinking about the resources that God has given you to steward and to manage and to have priorities that look like Abram's. Because here's the question that we need to consider for ourselves, according to Abram and Lot, is this. Are your priorities more like Lot's? or Abram's? Are your priorities, if you could do an audit on your financial world, what's the most important, what's first, what's the loudest in your financial world? Is it about me, myself, and I? Or is it about honoring God and serving and taking care of others? What do your priorities actually look like? So I want to give us a couple direct challenges, something that would help us recalibrate, make a shift to where we can partner with God, where we can become people of God's future. And along the way, together we'll be able to do something like building a new facility, building a home for us to gather in and bless Kokomo from. I want to give us some direct challenges from the text. Here's one. This is what Abram did. He prioritized honoring God with his first and best. This is the kind of decision, that first building block of Abram's life when he looked at the things that he had, the life that he lived. He wanted to honor God with his first and his best. I mean, you see it all the way throughout Abram's story. He doesn't ever believe that what he has came from his own hand. He doesn't see himself as an owner, but as a middle manager, a steward of the resources. And he's always stopping to mark a moment, to worship God, to honor him, and to give back to him. But we also see Abram as the first person that we see in the text start this practice that Christians have been doing for thousands and thousands of years called tithing as well. And we don't have enough time to look at the text specifically, but in Genesis chapter 14, we see that Lot gets himself in trouble because of the land that he picked. It's almost like he picked me, myself, and I, and it led him to some destruction, some trouble. He actually gets kidnapped by some evil kings. And so Abram, again, is so driven by his love for people that he stages this daring rescue mission. You should check it out sometime this week in Genesis chapter 14, because he saves Lot's life, and then the evil kings that were holding him captive, they actually left, and then Abram found himself becoming even more wealthy than ever before because he had all the spoils from this rescue mission. And it's amazing because the very first thing that you see Abram do after he got double wealthy from where he was before is that he meets this priest of the Most High God by the name of Melchizedek, and he offers a tithe back. And a tithe, just the language of tithe, I know we don't talk about it a lot because I think the language is abused inside of our churches today and it's manipulative. But what I want you to see from Genesis 14 is that a tithe is offering God a tenth. That's what tithe means in Hebrew, a tenth. It's that first and best back to God. Abram just won another victory. More amazing things happen. And the first thing that Abram does is to offer back his first and his best to honor God to this priest by the name of Melchizedek. It's the first thing that he did. My friends, if we want to have the right kind of priorities, we need to start looking at our victories, our financial worlds, not as ours, but they're on loan from God. And the posture that God is after, the posture of our heart that God is after, the right priority is to say, not I will give this to you and your work, God, if I have any left over, if I had a good week, and if I had a bad week, I'll withhold. But no, it's the posture of saying my first and best goes to you and your work. This was Abram's posture all the way throughout his journey. His priority was to first honor God because he knows he didn't come up with it on his own. That's what I want to challenge you with today, is to be someone who prioritizes honoring God with the first and best. Maybe for you that looks like taking a different look on how you spend your pie, the resources that God gives you through your work. Maybe that's going to ask you to recalibrate. Are you giving God leftovers or just if you have some extra? Or is God the priority there? And are you seeing your paycheck? Are you seeing those automatic deposits as something that you earned from your own skill and business acumen and your work? Or are you seeing it as God providing for you and your family and to provide for other people? I want you to wrestle with what that looks like. What does it look like to prioritize God in our financial world by giving our first and best? Because that's what Abram's priorities were. The second thing I want us to see about Abram's priorities is this right here, that Abram did this. He prioritized serving other people because he recognized that people matter most to God. Hear me, you guys. If you don't hear anything else today, the thing that matters most to our Heavenly Father is people. You matter so much to your Heavenly Father. The you next to you matters so much to our Heavenly Father. It's what he's about. It's what he's always been about. And when there are rules and there are regulations and there are barriers between us loving people and taking care of people, then God has always been in the business of tearing those things down. And Abram understood that what matters most to God is people and caring for people, loving people, serving people, honoring the image of God in people's lives. And so he prioritized that with his financial reality. He prioritized that with his time, with his skills, with everything about him. You saw this in the land dispute that we looked at in Genesis chapter 13. He took the loss financially so that there would not be a loss of relationship between Lot's people and Lot and himself. He took the loss there. You see this when he put his own life on the line to do this daring rescue mission to save his kidnapped nephew, Lot, as well. He went to serve people, to love people. You know what it looks like to prioritize serving and caring and taking care of people in our world? It means that we've got to live by a different law than the consumption assumption. Pastor Andy Stanley, he calls the consumption assumption this reality right here. We'll define it this way. The consumption assumption is this, is if it comes to me, it's meant for me. If it drops into my bank account, it's for me to consume. It's for me to spend. If it comes to me, it's for me to consume. My friends, I know this is the way that we think about money in our cultural moment, but I want to encourage you that this is a lie. This is broke thinking. This leads to a life less than what God has dreamed for us. If it comes to us, does not mean that it is for us. If it comes to us, we need to understand that it's a tool that can be used to take care of our families and to do good, to join God's kingdom work. Abram understood this, and he realized that his life, his wealth, wasn't just for himself to squeeze out everything he possibly could for him and for his name and for his little empire. No, it was about other people. It was always about other people because people matter most to God. You know, as we're in this season, and I'm unabashedly inviting every single person, every family to participate with us on this journey of raising these funds so that we can continue the ministry of Bridgeway Church in a new home. I want you to consider sacrificing and giving courageously and consistently and creatively, because what we get to do at church, you guys, is love and serve and care for people. I mean, just this last week, I was bombarded with the reality of when people give, to Bridgeway, it's not just serving people by giving to Bridgeway, but you get to serve people by giving through our church here. It's just an amazing thing. On Thursday, I met with a young woman who is going through a messy divorce that she didn't ask for. She's got a young child, and she sat across the table with just tears streaming down her face, and she feels like she's done something wrong, that she's not enough, that she is worthless because her husband went out on her with somebody else. And she's just feeling so broken over it. And I got to look her in the eyes and lift her eyes and lift her head and let her know that she has been wronged, that she is loved, that she is cherished, and that her Heavenly Father loves her. And this does not need to be the end of her story. And I just got to weep with her and mourn with her, but lift her eyes to a new reality. That's the kind of work that we are about here at Bridgeway. The kind of work of serving people that we're about here at Bridgeway is the reality that we have 4 people that are in Gen Z going into the waters of baptism today, declaring their allegiance to King Jesus. I mean, that's reaching them and letting them know that there's a God who loves them and inviting them to be on mission with them. That is the work that we get to do to serve and love people. This World Kindness Day that we're doing this next week for next Sunday to serve our friends experiencing homelessness in our community, inviting everybody to give towards this so that we can provide breakfast for them. I mean, this is the kind of work that we get to do when you give through Bridgeway. This is what we get to do together as we prioritize other people. That's the invitation, my friends. So let me ask you again, I'll ask you this way. What would it look like to put God first in every decision? To put honoring him, trusting him, to say that all the money I have, I'm just managing it because it came from him, and putting God first by serving other people. What would that look like for you? Because the invitation is for us to be people that have priorities that look like Abram's priorities. Because that's what a partner with God, his priorities, her priorities would look like. So my friends, please don't hear my voice in any kind of guilt, shame, coercion, anything along those lines, but hear this clearly that I'm inviting you to recalibrate, to make a shift, to consider that just because it comes to you and drops into your bank account, It doesn't necessarily mean it's for you to consume, but maybe God is inviting you to something bigger. Maybe for you, that means that you're going to look at your resources and your savings, and you're going to give a portion towards this incredible venture that we have in front of us with Bridge to the Future. Maybe for you, you're going to start giving that first and best for the very first time in a recurring way to make sure that Comcast or AT&T or Verizon's not receiving more of these resources that God's put on loan to you than God himself is. And maybe for you, it's selling something that you own, trading something in to do something lesser for this reason, to show that just because it comes to you, it's not for you to consume. I don't know what it is, but I'm inviting you to let God mess with your priorities. Invite him into these conversations, and let's see what kind of legacy and kingdom history we can make together. But it's going to take every family to do their part. I pray that we'll meet the moment together.